The Monster Hunter series is perhaps best known for its diverse roster of highly imaginative yet grounded fantasy creatures. From wolf dragons that rely on a symbiosis with electric beetles, to asexually reproducing god eaters, to funny little guys just hanging out, the franchise has it all. But a lesser known aspect of Monster Hunter are the unseen monsters. Creatures that we know exist, but have yet to appear in any mainline game. In fact, it is likely that most of these will never make a full appearance. So, in this special episode, I thought I'd ditch the documentary style to talk about some of the cool monsters that have only been shown and described in some of the extra material for the series, be it books, concept art, or in-game dialogue that is easy to miss. Over the years, the series has had many flagship monsters, the main adversary that gets a spot on the game cover and is considered your arch enemy in every specific game's story. But did you know that one flagship apparently comes in many different colors? The Nargacuga is generally known as a black panther-like flying wyvern, with some games depicting it as more of a bluish color. However, Monster Hunter Illustrations 1, which is a collection of Monster Hunter concept art as well as other illustrations, mentions that Nargacuga can actually develop coats of varying different colors, depending on the season and even the breed. The text mentions that thoroughbred Nargacuga, that is to say a Nargacuga with pure genetics that haven't been mixed with other breeds, are exceedingly rare, which implies the existence of many different Nargacuga versions, not subspecies, but rather breeds, like with dogs, cats, and bears. The text mentions that the black fur turns partially blue depending on the season, but that fully blue Nargacuga are exceedingly rare. It even alludes to the existence of white Nargacuga, which is interesting because Monster Hunter Frontier did actually introduce a white Nargacuga, the blinking Nargacuga. If the main variable in Nargacuga appearances is the fur color, that could explain the green Nargacuga. As a genetically distinct subspecies, it might have evolved out of a specific breed of Nargacuga that tended to have greenish fur. This explanation of fur color being fairly changeable also based on the environment, such as seasonal factors, is also expressed in the deviant Silverwind Nargacuga, which is described as an aged individual. So, just how the fur changes based on the season, so too does it seem to gain white streaks with age. As a series that has to pump out around 20 or so unique designs per game, Monster Hunter produces a lot of concept art. What I personally find really cool is that they rarely throw that concept art away. Instead, they often reuse it in art books as stand-ins for unseen monsters, relatives of creatures we know that simply didn't make it into the game. I could honestly pick any one monster, but let's look at a fan favorite, the Deviljho. According to the official phylogeny as it has been updated in the Rise lorebook, Deviljho is not actually alone in its ancestral branch, and is instead part of an unknown infraorder and even a superfamily named Violent Wyvern. This might imply the existence of other close relatives, and looking over concept art turned unseen monster, we can find 3 of them. Scarface over here takes a lot of inspiration from an actual T-Rex, with its massive head and jaws and exaggerated eye ridge. The standout feature of this species is the giant mouth covered in what seem to be regenerating teeth and, of course, scars. As an early member of the Brute Wyvern class, it seems that this species was meant to represent the brutality and power of this, at the time, new group of monsters. After all, the Japanese term for Brute Wyvern, Juryushu, includes the kanji Ju, which refers to an animalistic brutality and beastly nature. This scarred relative of the Deviljho seems to embody this idea. Looking at this artwork, it's easy to imagine that this relative would be of similar temperament to Deviljho, constantly looking for a fight, but lacking the massive muscles and defensive bulk. A glass cannon where the mouth is both offense and defense. The second unseen Deviljho species seems to be in better shape, having no scars and even sporting osteodermal armored plating on its body. Notably, it features a head crest or frill that seems to be expandable. Its most striking feature though has to be the size and shape of its massive incisor teeth, fully visible even when the mouth is closed. Looking at these features, it's entirely possible that this was a territorial violent wyvern, rather than a nomadic one like the Deviljho. Its frill and teeth could be part of a territorial threat display, and its more sophisticated armor might imply a more defensive lifestyle compared to its cousins. The third Deviljho relative is the most otherworldly one. This unnamed brute wyvern has a massive muscular hump, as well as tattered, slouching skin that seems to be falling off the creature's body. Based on its sheer mass and shape, it is likely the closest relative of the Deviljho and probably lives a similar life. The biggest mystery here is the flaking skin. From the existence of the savage Deviljho, we know that dragon element is harmful to the body in large quantities, so maybe this wyvern is burdened with a more pronounced dragon organ that dissolves its body tissues more grotesquely than with the regular Deviljho. An interesting fact not many people know about Monster Hunter is that the monster roster we fight is highly selective. If a creature exists in the world but is largely unproblematic, they won't get hunted, and as a result won't appear in-game. This extends even to different sexes. If the male version of the monster is dangerous, but the female one is passive, then every one of said monster that we hunt is male, while the female version is entirely unseen. This is maybe most pronounced with the Fated Four, where we have only ever seen one of the sexes for each species. All Mizutsune we fight in the game are male, as their mating season makes them hormonal menaces that need to be dealt with. While the males are aggressive lone travelers, female Mizutsune are said to live in large colonies where they tend to each other and any potential young. They are described as less colorful than the males, as well as having shorter fins, and are generally considered unproblematic, which is why we have never seen them outside of some small sketches. Similarly, all Astalos we fight in-game are also male. Not much is known about the females, besides that they have a smaller head crest. Since this crest aids in perception and threat displays, it's possible that female Astalos are less aggressive than the males, but we truly have no information on them regardless. The only Glavenus we have ever seen are also all male. Female Glavenus are described as duller in color, with a softer and sometimes smaller tail. This also means that females might not collect ores to stick to their tails like the males do. Conversely, the Gammoth that we fight in the games are exclusively female. There is this fan canon going around that it is simply an alpha female of the Popo species, but this seems to be entirely made up as far as I can tell. What we do know is that juvenile Gammoth will sometimes hide around Popo herds for safety, which leads adult female Gammoth to also travel alongside those herds. Juvenile Gammoth are however said to be of mostly white color, to blend in with the snow. We have no information about the males as far as I am aware. Two of the most controversial monsters in the series' history have to be Akantor and Ukanlos. Not because of their fights, but because of their ecology. Despite being massive, flightless dragons with immense power and mass, they are officially classified as flying wyverns, a categorization some people take issue with. I think it's fine, as wings can undevelop, but it's easy to see where the sentiment comes from once you look at how these monsters were introduced. Both of them serve as final bosses for their respective introduction games, and are even given a special bit of lore wherein they're revered as deities. Akantor is known as the Black God of the Volcano, while Ukanlos is known as the White God of the Mountains. But did you know that there is, at least supposedly, A third god wyvern? Hunter's Encyclopedia G illustrates the existence of the red god of the desert, a sandy relative of Ukanlos and Akantor that is said to exist in the desolate wastelands of the old world. That is basically all the information we get about this creature. No abilities or behaviors are described. However, Monster Hunter Frontier includes a monster called Odibaturasu, a giant flightless flying wyvern that is related to Akantor and Ukanlos and, you guessed it, is red and lives in the desert. While this has never been officially stated, Odibaturasu is almost definitely a remix of this original idea for the third god wyvern. But as far as the mainline games are concerned, this creature remains a myth, and I would love to see this idea revisited in the future. If you are a regular viewer of the channel, you may have seen my lore story about the Crimson Diablos. I did not actually make that up though. The Crimson Diablos is a canonically existing monster in the Monster Hunter series. In Illustrations 1, a hunter reports witnessing a battle between a regular Diablos and a red individual. The red Diablos is described as twice the size of a regular one, with a red carapace shaking with rage. To quote the report, "There was no doubt that the red giant was a king among its kind." That is not a whole lot to go off of. Is it a subspecies? A variant? Honestly, who knows? The idea of a Mega Diablos seems to have stuck with the development team at least, as over 10 years after this illustration was drawn, we would get Bloodbath Diablos, a powerful deviant whose carapace shakes with rage. But the actual red Diablos itself still remains unseen. Art books are not the only way we learn of unseen monsters, however. Many of them are actually hinted at or hidden within the games themselves. Most recently, Monster Hunter Rise's Frost Islands map featured a mysterious giant skeleton laying about the frozen waters. We are told through the relic notes that these are the remains of a giant dragon that was vanquished by a dragon ship expedition. We can also find the ship itself, split in two and its crew long dead. But what exactly this creature was is left for us to imagine. Well, we are absolutely obsessed with ecology and lore, so we can extract some extra information from this scene, I think. Looking at the size of the skeleton, as well as the shape of the skull, it's safe to assume that this creature was a mountain dragon. Mountain dragons are a suborder of elder dragon defined by enormous size as well as the ability to bind rock dust and minerals directly to their shells in order to grow massive suits of rocky armor. The two known species of this group are Laoshanlung and Zoramagdaros. Looking more closely at the remains, the body seems somewhat long like that of a Lao, as well as being closer in size to it than to a Zora. So, this was perhaps a frosty cousin of a Laoshanlung. But we will never know for sure. Hiding monsters through their remains is pretty cool by itself. But what if we take it a step further? What if a monster is straight up visible in the game, alive and well, but simply out of reach? As far as I am aware, this has happened once. In Monster Hunter Generations, we are introduced to the Jurassic Frontier, a tropical hunting ground that is isolated from the rest of the world and thus houses many ancient and unknown species. And cheekily, just in Area 1, in a lake that is out of bounds, one can look at a sort of sea wyvern hanging out and watching the player. This monster is never referenced in any text that I know of, and there's no way to interact with it, so all we can do is look at it from afar and wonder what it might be. Seeing as it lives in water, it is likely a type of Leviathan or Piscine wyvern. Instinctively, I would guess the former, as the figure seems to be somewhat wider, a trait we have seen in some Leviathans but not in Piscine wyverns. It could, however, also be a close relative of the Giratodos. The Giratodos is described as an ancestor species for the Piscine wyvern, and implied to be a very ancient species. The Jurassic frontier is filled with species and genuses that are old and partially extinct, so this could be a possible connection. But unfortunately, any claims I make will remain baseless, as this little guy simply refuses to tell us his secrets. The Rathalos is many things. The flagship monster of the series, a wall for many new players, a support item in Smash Bros. But its most famous title is perhaps that of the King of the Sky. And when you're fighting him from the ground, running out of flash bombs and antidotes while he flies laps around you, yeah, that name makes sense. But despite this moniker, we get to see surprisingly little of his aerial superiority over other flying monsters. Whenever cutscenes show him fighting in the air, it's not really as much of a curb stomp as it should be. Well, here's where the art books come back into play, as one hunter's report in Illustrations 1 describes the swift brutality of a Rathalos snatching prey out of the air. Unfortunately, poor Rathalos gets overshadowed again by the fact that this report reveals an entirely unknown species of monster, a sort of giant eagle. Considering it is Wrath-sized, it probably isn't meant to just be a fat bird, so it's most likely an unseen species of bird wyvern, specifically a true bird wyvern like the Kutkus and Garugas of this world, as opposed to raptor bird wyverns like Velocidrome. As usual with these illustrations, we are given no information on this creature, besides that it can fly and shares a habitat with the Wraths. One interesting detail here is that one of Rathalos' rivals, Astalos, was originally drawn to be much more bird-like, so perhaps this illustration was part of what inspired the creation of my personal favorite monster. The actual eagle wyvern itself, however, remains unseen, which is a shame. We really are due for a high-tier bird wyvern. As always, thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to all of our patrons. Reminder, if you want to see every video a few days earlier, you can sign up to the Patreon and get early access to all the content I produce. A very special thank you to Fiction Ape, Anthony the Hedgehog, Arcturian711, Big Pidge, Claire Miboon, Danilo Villavicencio, Dicey, Geo, Hubble Mirror 123, Hashi, Jameson Tate, Magenta, Makot 02, Mensch, Mr. Pyramid, Mr. Meander, Mr. Chef, Pere Fuego, Peroscoco, Person 212, Project Iceman, Russell, Sir Newt, Oak Wood Tree, Iron Camel, and Courage. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye, friends.